Lily Caldwell had learned to measure time by quieter things, not by calendars or appointments, but by the slow rhythm of her breath when she woke each morning, by the careful way she rose from bed with one hand pressed to her lower back, and by the soft, almost secret movements inside her that reminded her she was no longer alone. Pregnancy had narrowed her world and deepened it at the same time. Every emotion felt heavier, more deliberate. Every silence carried meaning. Ethan lay beside her, already awake, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as if answers might be written there. He used to turn toward her in the mornings, used to trace idle shapes along her arm and ask how she'd slept. Now, even when his body remained close, his thoughts felt elsewhere. Lily noticed these things not with suspicion at first, but with a quiet ache she could not name. Their marriage looked intact from the outside. Ethan was dependable, steady in his routines, responsible in all the ways that impressed relatives and reassured strangers. He worked long hours, paid attention to practical details, and never forgot obligations that could be measured. But affection was harder to track. It slipped away unnoticed, like warmth leaving a room when a door was left open. Lily told herself that this was normal. People said marriage changed after a baby, that men withdrew before stepping into fatherhood, uncertain and overwhelmed. She wanted to believe that explanation because it required no confrontation, no fear. Belief was easier than doubt, and Lily had always chosen the gentler path. That morning, Ethan mentioned the family retreat as if it were an afterthought. "My mother wants us all there," he said while buttoning his shirt. "Just a weekend by the lake. Fresh air might be good for you." "For us," Lily corrected softly, "yes. For us," Ethan replied, though his voice lacked emphasis. He did not meet her eyes. The lake had once been a place of happiness for Ethan. Lily knew this because he had told her early in their relationship, back when sharing memories felt like sharing promises. He spoke of summers there, of laughter echoing over water, of a girl who knew him before responsibility shaped his edges. Lily remembered the name without trying. Ava Monroe. It was difficult to forget a name spoken with such unconscious care. Ethan rarely mentioned Ava now, but absence could speak as loudly as repetition. Lily had learned that love did not always end cleanly. Sometimes it lingered, buried under years and choices, waiting for an excuse to resurface. She stood in front of the mirror after Ethan left, studying the changes in her face. Her cheeks were fuller, her eyes more tired, yet there was a softness she did not recognize from before. Motherhood had begun reshaping her long before the child arrived. She wondered, not for the first time, whether Ethan could see that softness or whether he only noticed what had been lost. The drive to the lake was quiet. Trees blurred past the windows, their branches bare against a pale sky. Lily watched Ethan's hands tighten on the steering wheel whenever the road curved toward familiar landmarks. He did not speak of memories, but his body remembered them anyway. Anticipation hummed through him, subtle yet unmistakable. When they arrived, Margaret Caldwell greeted them with brisk affection. She embraced Ethan first, then Lily, her smile polite but searching. Margaret had always approved of Lily in principle. She admired her steadiness, her lack of drama. Yet approval was not the same as closeness, and Lily sensed she was evaluated more than embraced, and S-bags were carried inside. Lily noticed Ethan scanning the surroundings, his attention darting toward the water, toward the far edge of the property. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but it planted unease deep in her chest. Ava arrived later that afternoon. She stepped out of her car with an ease that seemed untouched by time, her smile familiar to everyone and intimate to Ethan. When their eyes met, something flickered between them, recognition sharpened by history. It lasted only a moment, but Lily saw it. She felt it. The air itself seemed to shift. "Ava," Ethan said, his voice betraying him before he could stop it. "Ethan," Ava replied, her tone warm, unguarded. Her gaze slid briefly to Lily, polite and curious, then returned to Ethan as if drawn there by habit. Introductions were made, hands were shaken, smiles exchanged. On the surface, everything followed acceptable lines. But Lily noticed how Ethan stood straighter, how his laughter came quicker. She noticed how Ava listened with an attention that felt practiced, how she remembered details from Ethan's past that Lily had never been part of. That evening, as dinner unfolded with shared stories and clinking glasses, Lily felt herself recede. Not because anyone pushed her aside, but because no one reached for her. Conversations circled around memories she could not enter, jokes built on shared experiences that excluded her by default. Ethan glanced at her occasionally, as if checking that she was still there, still patient. Lily told herself she was being sensitive. Pregnancy magnified everything, people said, yet her instincts whispered a warning she did not want to hear. Later, she stepped outside alone. The lake stretched before her, dark and still, reflecting the dimming sky. It looked peaceful, almost inviting, but Lily felt a strange heaviness as she stood at its edge. Water had a way of revealing truths, of reflecting what people try to hide. Behind her, laughter drifted from the house. Ethan's laughter. It sounded younger than it had in months. Lily placed a hand over her stomach, grounding herself in the steady presence of the life growing within her. Whatever uncertainties surrounded her, this was real. This was now. She breathed deeply, making herself a quiet promise to endure, to observe, to protect what mattered. As the first stars appeared over the lake, Lily sensed that this weekend would not pass without consequence. Some choices were already forming, invisible but inevitable, and she stood unknowingly at the edge of one. Morning arrived gently, as if the house itself wished to pretend nothing unusual had occurred. Emily woke before Daniel, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. The memory of the night lingered, not as a scene replayed, but as a feeling she could not shake. Nothing improper had happened, she reminded herself, yet the reassurance felt thin. Downstairs, Laura was already bustling in the kitchen, humming as she prepared breakfast. Emily joined her, grateful for the normalcy of familiar sounds. Laura chatted easily, recounting plans for the day, unaware of the quiet tension that sat just beneath Emily's calm expression. Daniel joined them soon after, distracted but pleasant, his attention divided between his coffee and his phone. Ethan entered last. He greeted everyone politely, his demeanor unchanged. Yet when his eyes met Emily's, there was a brief pause, acknowledgement without emphasis. He said nothing about the night, and Emily felt both relief and disappointment in that restraint. The day unfolded with small, shared activities. A walk through the nearby park, lunch on the patio, conversation that drifted from light humor to comfortable silence. Daniel took a work call midway through the afternoon and disappeared indoors, leaving Emily outside with Laura and Ethan. Laura spoke animatedly, but it was Ethan who noticed when Emily grew quiet, who adjusted the conversation without calling attention to her withdrawal. It was subtle, the way they began to orbit one another emotionally. No deliberate choices, no conscious intentions, just moments of understanding that formed without effort. Ethan asked Emily about her interests, not out of obligation, but curiosity. She answered carefully at first, then more freely, surprised by how long it had been since someone had asked simply to know her. Later, while Laura stepped inside to take a call, Emily and Ethan remained on the patio. The air was warm, the kind that invited honesty. Ethan leaned back slightly, giving her space even as he spoke. "You seem thoughtful," he said. "Not unhappy, just carrying something." Emily hesitated. She had learned to deflect questions like that, to offer vague reassurances. Yet the words came before she could stop them. "Sometimes people grow used to silence," she said, "and forget how loud it feels inside." Ethan did not interrupt. He waited, letting the quiet settle rather than rushing to fill it. "That sounds exhausting," he replied finally. The simplicity of the response struck her. No advice, no judgment, just recognition. Emily laughed softly, a sound edged with sadness. "It is." From that moment, conversation flowed with less effort. They spoke about missed expectations, about how easily time reshaped relationships without asking permission. Emily was careful not to mention Daniel directly, but the absence was implied in every carefully chosen word. As the afternoon faded, Emily felt an unfamiliar pull, a desire to continue the conversation, to linger in this space where she felt understood. The realization unsettled her. She reminded herself of who Ethan was, of the boundaries that mattered, of the marriage she still occupied even if it felt hollow. That evening, Daniel announced he would be working late again, retreating to a quiet corner of the house. Laura excused herself early, tired from the day. Emily found herself alone in the living room, flipping through channels without interest. When Ethan joined her, he kept a respectful distance, sitting at the opposite end of the couch. They talked quietly, careful with their words. Emily spoke about her work, about how fulfillment sometimes slipped through her fingers despite her efforts. Ethan listened, occasionally offering observations that felt thoughtful rather than intrusive. At one point, he stopped himself mid-sentence. "I don't want to cross any lines," he said, his voice steady. "I just want you to know you're not invisible." The statement landed with more weight than any compliment. Emily looked away, emotion tightening her throat. "That's kind of you," she replied, aware that kindness could be dangerous when it arrived at the wrong moment. Later that night, Emily lay awake again, replaying the day in fragments. She recognized the shift within herself, the subtle leaning towards someone who made her feel heard. The knowledge brought guilt, sharp and immediate. She had not touched Ethan, had not spoken words that openly betrayed her marriage, yet something private had already begun to form. The next morning, Emily called her friend Martha during a quiet moment. Martha listened patiently as Emily described her unease without naming its source. When Emily finished, Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "Emotional closeness can be just as complicated as anything physical," she said. "Sometimes more so." Emily ended the call with a heaviness she could not ignore. She watched Ethan from across the room later that day, noticing how careful he remained, how he never sought her out when others were present. His restraint mirrored her own growing conflict. Before they left Laura's house, Ethan approached Emily briefly in the hallway. "I enjoy talking with you," he said simply, "but I respect your life as it is." She nodded, grateful and unsettled all at once. "I do too." As Emily and Daniel drove away, the distance between them felt unchanged, yet Emily herself felt altered. She understood now that the most fragile boundaries were not physical at all, but emotional, crossed quietly without witnesses, and as the road stretched ahead, Emily wondered whether recognizing the line was enough to keep her from stepping further, or whether awareness only made the temptation harder to resist. The storm arrived without ceremony, as if the sky had simply grown tired of restraint. Wind swept across the lake, roughening the surface and bending the trees along the shore. The adults gathered inside at first, watching rain streak down the windows, listening to thunder roll low and distant. It should have been a signal to stay still, to wait it out. Instead, restlessness took hold. Ethan stood near the door, glancing repeatedly toward the lake. Ava noticed before anyone else did. "It won't last long," she said, her voice carrying a familiar confidence. "Storms here never do." Lily felt a tightening in her chest. "We should stay inside," she said, placing a hand instinctively over her stomach. "The ground is slippery." Ethan nodded, but his attention drifted past her, already elsewhere. "We'll just check the dock," he replied. "Make sure everything's secure." Ava was already reaching for her jacket. "I'll come." Lily hesitated, then followed. She told herself it was caution, not mistrust, that pushed her forward. The rain had eased slightly, but the wind had not. The lake looked darker now, its surface churning in restless patterns. They walked carefully along the path, the wood beneath their feet slick with rain. At the dock, a sudden gust caused Ava to stumble. Ethan reacted instantly, reaching out to steady her. Their hands lingered longer than necessary. "I've got you," Ethan said, his grip firm. Lily stood a step behind them, watching, her unease sharpening into something colder. Before she could speak, another gust tore across the dock. The wood shifted beneath their feet, and the world tilted. Ava cried out as she lost her balance, slipping sideways. At the same moment, Lily's foot slid on the wet boards. There was no time to recover. The dock seemed to vanish beneath them, replaced by open air and the roar of water. The lake swallowed the sound of their voices. Cold surged around Lily, shocking the breath from her lungs. Panic flared, bright and immediate. The weight of her clothes dragged her down, and she struggled to orient herself, her arms flailing as she fought to surface. The baby inside her kicked sharply, a frantic reminder of what was at stake. Nearby, Ava broke through the surface, gasping, her arms thrashing wildly. She cried out Ethan's name, her voice high with fear. Ethan stood frozen at the edge of the dock, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. His eyes darted between the two figures in the water, both struggling, both calling out. Time stretched, thinning into unbearable seconds. "Ethan," Lily called, her voice weaker than she wanted it to be. She tried to keep herself afloat, every movement costing more effort than the last. The cold seeped deeper, numbing her limbs that Ava's cries grew more frantic. "I can't, Ethan, please." Something in that plea broke through Ethan's hesitation. He moved, not thoughtfully, not deliberately, but with the raw instinct of memory and reflex. He dove toward Ava, arms cutting through the water with desperate speed. Lily saw the choice the moment it was made. Not because Ethan looked at Ava, but because he did not look back at her. The lake felt endless now. Lily's strength waned, fear pressing in on her from all sides. She thought of mornings filled with quiet hope, of hands resting on her stomach, of promises never spoken aloud but deeply believed. She did not scream again. There was no breath left for it. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind. Daniel surfaced beside her, pulling her upward with determined force. He had not hesitated. He had not paused to weigh history against responsibility. He simply acted. "I've got you," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He kept Lily's head above water, guiding her toward the shore with slow, powerful movements. On the other side, Ethan reached Ava, gripping her tightly, murmuring reassurance as he towed her toward safety. Ava clung to him, coughing, shaken, her face pale but alive. By the time Lily felt solid ground beneath her, her body trembled uncontrollably. Daniel helped her sit, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, each one painful. Ethan emerged moments later, Ava supported at his side. Relief crossed his face when he saw Lily conscious, but it was followed immediately by something heavier, something that looked like understanding arriving too late. Lily did not meet his gaze. She stared at the water, at the ripples slowly settling back into deceptive calm. The lake had taken nothing from her physically, yet she felt as though something essential had been stripped away. Margaret's voice echoed from the house as others rushed toward them, concern filling the air. Questions were asked. Blankets were offered. Ava was ushered inside, fussed over, reassured. Ethan hovered near her, his hand lingering at her back. Daniel stayed with Lily. When Ethan finally approached, his expression fractured. "Lily, he began. She raised a hand, stopping him. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and controlled. "I know." Those two words carried more weight than any accusation. Ethan fell silent. As they moved back toward the house, Lily leaned on Daniel, her steps slow but steady. Behind her, the lake reflected the dimming sky, calm once more, as if nothing had happened at all. But Lily knew better. Some moments did not pass. They settled. They shaped what came next. And as thunder faded into the distance, Lily understood that the storm had already done its work. The days after the storm unfolded with an unnatural quiet, as though the house itself were reluctant to acknowledge what had happened. Lily rested in the guest room, wrapped in borrowed blankets, her body sore but intact. Doctors had been called, reassurances offered. Physically, she and the baby were fine. Everyone repeated this fact as if it were enough. It wasn't. Ethan hovered at the edges of the room, never fully entering, never fully leaving. He brought water, asked careful questions, waited for permission that never came. Lily answered politely when required, her voice even, her eyes distant. Something essential between them had shifted, and neither pretended otherwise. Ava remained in the house for one more night. She moved quietly now, stripped of the ease that had once surrounded her. When she crossed paths with Lily in the hallway the following morning, she stopped. "I'm sorry," Ava said, her voice low, "for everything." Lily studied her for a moment, not with anger, but with clarity. "You didn't choose," she replied. "He did." Ava absorbed the words, nodding slowly. There were tears in her eyes, but Lily felt no urge to comfort her. Sympathy did not require closeness. Some boundaries, once drawn, could not be crossed again. By afternoon, Ava left. Ethan watched her car disappear down the long gravel drive, his shoulders sagging as though something had finally released its grip on him. Relief and loss tangled together on his face, indistinguishable. Margaret confronted Ethan that evening. Lily heard raised voices through the thin walls, his mother's tone sharp with disappointment. She did not catch every word, but she heard enough to understand that excuses were being dismantled, one by one. Later, Ethan came to Lily's door and knocked. When she opened it, he looked smaller than she remembered, a man diminished by his own hesitation. "I didn't think," he said. "I just reacted." "That's the problem," Lily replied calmly. "You didn't think. Not about me. Not about our child." Ethan's voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt you." Lily shook her head gently. "Intention doesn't change impact." Silence filled the space between them, heavy but honest. For the first time since the lake, Ethan seemed to truly see her. Not as someone patient and enduring, but as someone altered by his choice. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. Lily rested a hand over her stomach, grounding herself in the steady truth of what remained. "You can't fix what you didn't break alone," she said. "And I can't pretend nothing changed." That night, Ethan slept on the couch. The next morning, Lily packed. Daniel arrived to help without being asked. He carried bags quietly, never offering opinions, never pressing for explanations. His presence was steady, respectful, exactly what Lily needed. As she prepared to leave, Ethan stood by the door, watching each movement as if committing it to memory. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Somewhere safe," Lily replied. "Somewhere quiet." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Can I come see the baby when—" "We'll talk about that later," Lily said. Not unkindly, just firmly. She paused at the threshold, turning back once. "I loved you," she said. "But love needs to be chosen when it's hardest, not when it's easy." Ethan could not respond. Words failed him now, just as they had at the lake. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, untouched by the storm that had passed through days earlier. Lily took a deep breath, feeling something unfamiliar rise within her. Not relief, not grief, but resolve. As the car pulled away, she did not look back. The lake remained behind them, still and shining under the open sky, reflecting nothing of the choice it had revealed. Life would continue, reshaped by a single moment when instinct spoke louder than vows. And somewhere ahead, Lily knew, a different future waited, one defined not by what she had lost, but by what she refused to lose again.